Like, for someone who says, who cares, it's just a bunch of rich kids together, how does that actually impact anything? Like, what does that do to, the ideological diversity, to the way that people function on a campus? Like, why does that matter to the broader community or the world more generally?
That's, I just attended a conference yesterday organized by this nonprofit that funds some of the work that I do at a nonprofit that I started. And we were talking about like blowback, and that's kind of one of the main, I know that you're not saying this, but people say, well, why does this matter? Not that many people go to Ivy League colleges, and there are a host of reasons why it matters. I'm not saying it is the only thing that matters in higher education in the United States, or the most important thing that matters in the United States, but it really, really matters. About 60% of Harvard students go on to investment banking, management consulting, and careers in the tech sector. I mean, if you look at the representation, if you look at associates analysts at McKinsey, at Goldman Sachs, at Google, I mean, they're overwhelmingly populated by these places. And obviously, Supreme Court justices, law clerks to Supreme Court justices. So these people these institutions are the gatekeepers to the elite. They're not the exclusive pathway to the elite, but they're the most common pathway to the elite. And a lot of what's gone wrong in America is the elite only kind of perceives one set of values. And I think it also foments mistrust of the elites. And, I think this is probably one of the pathways that Trump exploited most skillfully, exploited a lot in 2016 is kind of feeding on this mistrust of elites. But, if you grew up in a poor community in Appalachia and you've never met anybody who went to one of these institutions, and, your kid has no prospect of going to one of them, let alone maybe even going to college, why should you mistrust the elite? And, I know you and I share a very kind of deep commitment to free speech and expression. And, I don't mistrust journalists. That's not to say that I agree with everything that's written in the New York Times or the New York Post or whatever. But, I actually went to college with 3 people who were on the masthead of the New York Times. So I do think that they are people of integrity. They may be people with whom I disagree. And I think that's important, so that doesn't take me down a pathway to being conspiratorial minded. That doesn't mean that I don't disagree with lots of things that I see. And so I think diversification of access to the elite in America, elite institutions, is essential to the preservation of democracy, which feels very, very much in jeopardy to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really sticks with me the most in terms of why this matters in the broader society, to your point, the vast overrepresentation of people who are Ivy League graduates in positions of power in the government, in the Supreme Court, in the places that really affect day-to-day people further, or in the broader scheme of things. And at the same time, have you read Batya Ungar-Sargon's book, Bad News, or are you familiar with it?
I know it.
Because she cites how, especially at institutions like the New York Times, there's a vast overrepresentation of people who graduated from places like Harvard and Ivy League graduates. And I think there's been, first of all, to your point, just a real insulation of people who make news and to make policy from the fact that there was a mass disaffected kind of middle of this country that Trump resonated with, that seemed to totally blindside people in 2016. Didn't blindside me as the daughter of a man who didn't go to college, who found success on his own, but certainly is not an academic and would not consider himself one. I mean, I saw the populist appeal firsthand, and I was probably the only person at my prep school campus who wasn't shocked by how 2016 ended up panning out. But then there's also the problem, too, where I think because the media and the people who they're supposed to be holding power to account, the media used to be a working class job and not something that's super swanky and as celebrated perhaps as it is today, or as chic as it is perhaps. And I think that there's also an element of if you went to college or or you're in the same kind of milieu as the people that you're supposed to be holding to account, and maybe the governor's son was your classmate, you don't treat them with the same skepticism. You don't hold their feet to the fire. And I think that's how we ended up in a place where if you really look at the distribution of how people are voting, it's college education is one of the most major factors.
College education drives the divide in America. So I agree with all of that. I mean, I think there are kind of two ways to kind of come at this issue. One would be to say, well, it should matter a lot less where you went to college. And it should, right?
Yeah.
What should matter is what your ideas are and how you express them. That's a tough nut to crack, a tough row to hoe, right? It's going to be very hard over, say, the next 20 years, although Harvard and its kind of peer institutions have suffered a lot of damage in the court of public opinion, but maybe, we can discuss whether it's for the right reason, but, I still think Goldman Sachs and McKinsey are going to hire most of their people from Harvard and Yale and Columbia. But I don't disagree with the thrust to try to reduce the importance of college as a signal of your virtue as a human being. But if it's true, if I'm right, that is going to be really hard to shift, then diversification of access to these institutions matter. And that's all types of diversity, right? I mean, class diversity matters and race diversity matters, and I'm sure we're going to agree on this. Ideological diversity matters.